Hello and welcome back to Democracy, everybody. Welcome back to Helldivers 2, where today we're going to be going over how to farm samples quickly. Now, there's a couple different ways that you can do this. More samples show up on higher difficulty, so the higher difficulty you play on and can successfully complete, because you do need to extract if you're getting samples, the better. There is some things that can absolutely help with this, and the samples do appear at different difficulties, where common samples are on every single one, rares are on level 4 and above, and then the super samples are on level 6 and above. The higher difficulty you play on, though, the total max amount of samples that you can get. If you're just looking for super samples, I would recommend playing on like the absolute highest difficulty on difficulty 10 and just going in with a team that's pretty good and that you are frequently extracting with. That's probably going to get you the best result for the super samples. You can still rush them in solo, and we're going to be talking about that here in a second, but I've found that that was the easiest for me when I was first getting samples. It took me a long time to get all the samples that I needed. The way I'm going to be showing, though, is actually not going on difficulty 10, because this is more set for solo. If you are playing in multiplayer, though, it is far, far easier to get a lot of samples and to get a lot of extra things, though. So if you're doing that and you have a 3-man, 4-man squad, whatever you got, then this is definitely going to be a whole lot easier. Even just like a 2-man squad can definitely help out with this, because some of the samples you can't easily get to unless you have other equipment, like any of them that might be locked in a bunker. So for this, I'm going to recommend 2 different ways. If you're just going for every type of sample, which I think most players are going to go for, whether you need like rares, commons, or supers, I'd recommend going up to difficulty 7. That's where I was finding about the easiest time playing solo and still collecting stuff and leaving missions without being overwhelmed. Any higher than this, it was kind of iffy, and even on 7, it could be kind of iffy, at least at the extraction zone itself. As to which faction you should go against, I had about the same success with any of the factions. So whether you want to go with bugs, squids, or bots, that's totally your choice. Personally, I like fighting the bots the best, but if you like fighting the bugs, or if you like fighting the squids the best, or whichever one you find the least annoying that can kill you, then go with that one. They're all okay. I'd recommend that you go on blitz missions. Blitz missions spawn the maximum amount of samples that can be on a map, and the maps are smaller than regular maps, so it's easier to go from location to location. This is even more important if you're playing in multiplayer. That's when it's going to be the easiest, because your whole team can spread out, or you can split up in 2 teams of 2, or however you want to do it. And then you can also bring things like the car to actually drive around, and then just stop at these, pick up as many samples as you can, hop back in the car, or just head to the next location. One thing that I would really recommend that you do when you're circling around trying to pick up as many samples as you can, be sure to try to create a path to the extraction. You're not actually trying to get to the extraction the fastest. You kind of want the timer to run out so that way you can collect the maximum amount of samples, or you want it to run down to where you can still get some reinforcements, or at least have somebody that can actually get to the extraction at the time. You don't want to be hanging around the extraction, though, because that's just going to cause more enemies to spawn. But whenever you do go to the extraction, then just drop whatever samples you have. That way you can go and then pick up more. And then if you die out there and you only lost like 2 or 3 samples, who cares? If you put 20 samples at the extraction, that's fantastic. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Like, those ones are basically guaranteed so long as nobody runs up and takes them and wanders off with them. Be sure to communicate too if you're playing this in multiplayer and you're not in like a 3 or 4-man squad or whatever. Drop the samples off at the extraction. That way they don't go missing by the end. There is also guaranteed samples at the extraction, at least on these higher difficulties. On difficulty 7, you can usually get a decent amount of super samples and a lot of rare and common samples. The other way, if you only need common samples, that I'd recommend is going all the way down to difficulty 1 to 3. These don't really matter as to which of these difficulties you're playing on, and this is more for like the super credit runs too. This is just going to be the most useful since the maps are the smallest. You can run through the map, there's basically no enemies, and then just go to each point of interest. You can complete the mission as well, and then once you've done all that, then you can just extract. You can usually do these missions within like less than 10 minutes a lot of the time, especially if you have certain other things that help with mobility, like the jump pack, the warp pack, or the vehicle as well, or a combination of them. You can also do this in multiplayer too if you're just farming like super credits. This is a fantastic way to farm them. I have a couple different videos talking about that. As for the weapons and gear and everything that I'd recommend, this is more personal preference, but some of these are a little bit better, especially on blitz missions. Also, farming like the difficulty 7 or the difficulty 10 blitz missions are really good for getting more XP for your weapons too. So for primary weapon, honestly, it's your choice. Pick whichever primary you'd like. Yes, there are some that can make the blitz missions a little bit faster, like the crossbow or the eruptor, but really it's your choice. Pick whichever one you want. For a secondary weapon, again, the ultimatum is going to be really useful since you can knock out illuminate ships and bot factories immediately with it. Grenade pistol is also really good for doing basically that same thing and knocking out the bug tunnels. The ultimatum can do it too, but it's usually not worth it unless it's Titan hole or something. For throwables, I'd recommend either the gas grenade or the thermite grenade. Gas grenade gives you the most amount of crowd control. It's really good on the bug and the squid front since you can just throw it and keep them occupied. The voteless and the swarms can't really bother you then. You can also use it to close up things. Thermite's really good for bots, and it's really good for illuminate though too, since you can just stick this directly to a ship and it will kill it guaranteed. And you can also just stick this to a bot factory and it will also kill it guaranteed. So very, very nice. For armor in particular, I would recommend if you have the light gunner suit, this one is really good, especially on the squid and the bug front, since it gives you extra tankiness and you don't lose any mobility from it. Scout armor can also be good if you just want to be trying to avoid everything. So if you want to run those armors, those are really nice for light armors. On the bot front, I tend to run heavy armor that's fortified. That way I can ignore a lot of the explosives and I'm usually not dying very quickly. Heavy armor can also be decent on like the bug and squid front if you want to take either the jump pack or the warp pack for the extra mobility. That way it's not weighing you down and you can survive longer. And then finally, there's some stratagems that I'd highly recommend that you take on these missions as well, just so that you can go through the mission quickly, as well as boosters. We'll talk about that here in a second. I would recommend the jump pack. Jump pack is super useful. You can get it really early on and it gives you extra mobility. Fantastic for just getting from location to location. The car, like we talked about, is really useful for actually going from location to location as well. The mechs honestly aren't even that bad if you want to take them on these missions, specifically on like bug and squid missions, because usually you can just clear up the objectives super quick and kill everything and then hop out and go and collect all the samples that you want. So that can be super useful for a team as well. And the warp pack is really, really useful. Warp pack just makes it so that you can get into bunkers solo. It also makes it so you can move around the map a whole lot quicker, regardless of what armor you're using. It's really good in heavy armor though, and that way you can just keep collecting as many samples as possible. There is also, at least if you find certain locations, little tricks to them too. Like I said, you can warp inside of the bunkers if you have the warp pack. That is super nice. If you're playing in multiplayer, that's not a big deal because you can just have two people open the door itself. That's fine. You can also potentially climb into them from the mech itself too if you bring the mechs along, where you have to position them facing away from the door and then you hop back out the back and usually you'll fall into the bunker. The thing is then usually you can't climb out though, so if you collect specifically super credits in there, that's good, but if you collect like samples in there, you're probably not going to be able to get out because you likely aren't going to be able to get back in your mech. So if you're going to do that, be sure to drop the samples outside of the door before you jump in, because otherwise you're probably going to have to blow yourself up inside there. And then, you know, there's not really a way for you to get back out of the bunker, which is pretty bad. Be sure not to take like throwing knives too, and be sure you have grenades when you hop in there so you can actually blow yourself up, or some sort of weapon that can harm you. As well as you find the samples that are buried under the ground, you don't actually need the entrenching tool to dig those up. You can actually just lay flat on the ground, so you can just dive on the ground and then you can just reach through the ground and pick them up too. That's really useful for picking up commons and rares. There's also a couple locations like on bug missions, the mushrooms. Those tend to have a lot of samples too, so be sure to look for all of these locations. Certain locations don't have very many, and don't feel too bad if you don't find like all of the samples per mission. You're not really going for that. You're just going for the samples as quickly as possible and then leaving. There are some boosters that help out with this that I'd recommend too. There is the sample scanner. This one is super useful. This one comes from the Masters of Ceremony War Bond, and this one makes it so every time you pick up a sample, there's a 15% chance that you get a second one. This counts for every sample. It's really useful. It does make a pretty big difference on the higher difficulties as to how many samples you can actually pick up. Really, really useful if your team has this one. There's also the sample extricator, which is okay. It's not quite as good as like the scanner is, but it's still decent if you just need more samples overall. This makes it so large enemies have a chance of dropping samples. They can't drop supers from this, and this is capped at 10. But still, if you're killing a lot of titans or chargers or something, this one is still really useful, and even if you're running through missions quickly, there are going to at least be a couple big enemies that you could probably farm with this, and it might get you a few more samples overall, depending on how quickly you're running through the missions. So that one is kind of useful as well. On top of that, Expert Extraction Pilot is actually not bad for these, even though I say this booster is one of the worst boosters in the game. This one does kind of help because it makes it so the call-in time is faster, and you can potentially get from mission to mission a little bit quicker. Over time, it can actually save up a decent amount of time, especially in multiplayer. In solo, I still wouldn't recommend this one. I think the sample scanner is the better one for solo. And then on top of that, for like a fourth booster, you could just pick any of the generically good ones, like the stamina booster, the health booster, muscle enhancement, or like the hell pot optimization. Those are all super nice too. When I tested this and ran a couple different missions, on average I was able to get about 15 to 20 or 25 common samples, depending on how many times the sample scanner kind of progged. Sometimes it would be a little bit more, and certain missions were a little bit easier. For rares, I managed to get anywhere from like 10 to 15 as well. That was pretty good. And then the super samples, I was usually on average about able to get 4 or 5 of them. So each of these runs, I did run the clock all the way down on blitz missions. So that meant that I was there for about 14 and a half minutes getting this solo. If I was in multiplayer, I would imagine these numbers would be a lot higher, and I imagine the time would be a lot less, or we would just max out the amount of samples that we got every mission. So with my runs, I would expect about every 5 runs, I'd have about 100 common samples, and then about 60 to 80 rares or so, and then around 20 to 25 supers, at least with this very limited amount of data that I have. Luckily for me, I don't really have to do this because I already have everything for my ship unlocked, but if you're brand new, then that's not the case. Hopefully this can help you out. This should also get you a lot of medals, and it should also get you a decent amount of super credits and requisition slips as well, since you are going from like location to location as quickly as possible. Hopefully this helped you out. Thank you guys so very much for watching this. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.